So this morning, I'm reading this article at SanDiegoUnionTribune.com, and the title of it was called San Diego is Thinking Big, Scary Big. And man, what a great article this was. And I was already trying to come up what my next episode in the podcast was going to be about. And I really wanted to get into, the whole idea of goal setting and bucket lists and a lot of ways to kind of plan our personal and business lives. But then when I saw what's happening here locally in San Diego County, this is fascinating and really is very aligned with what I wanted to talk about. So this is a great opportunity to talk about a lot of current events that are happening here locally and really transforming these ideas into ways that I think this can benefit you, because we're going to get into bucket lists and goal setting and a lot of other things in this episode. But let's go through this article just briefly. And there's a lot of fascinating things here. And these are all major infrastructure projects that are underway or being considered or maybe in concept stage. Some are very near completion. So it's just a really neat story to tell here. And the first one in the list was the recent news about this $5 billion essentially pipeline that they want to bring, not the Keystone XL pipeline, but this is one where they want to bring more water into San Diego. And they want to bring it from the Colorado River, and they want to essentially bore through mountains, in East County, essentially like creating tunnels and having this incredible waterway to bring more water into San Diego. And, we live on a desert next to the ocean, and water is always a big consideration. But this is a big idea. I mean, this is a scary big idea, $5 billion. And I don't know if you saw some of the stories on it, but it was really interesting. Now, I kind of wonder, is this the right answer? I mean, we've already got that desalination plant in Carlsbad that supplies about 7% of our water in the county. And I know that first plant was really expensive to build, like $1 billion. But, future plants are going to be a lot more efficient, a lot less costly. And we've got an unending supply of water just to the west in the Pacific Ocean. And, there's other projects underway about, converting wastewater, which we'll talk about here in a second. But it's interesting that there's a lot of thought leaders that are coming up with these big ideas. And, this concept of this huge pipeline from the desert, from the Colorado River to San Diego, intriguing. And then, of course, there was the even bigger project, this $180 billion futuristic transportation system for San Diego County. And that's being considered by the leaders at SANDAG. And, this is going to involve more rail, more subways and trains. There's going to be more autonomous vehicles, electric vehicles. They're talking about bike lanes and pedestrians, and it's this comprehensive transportation solution for San Diego County. And, it's more than just simply broadening the freeways. And on one level, this is great. I mean, it's thinking big. It's thinking in the future. It's really trying to break the mold of San Diego as sort of this little town, this small town mentality. Again, I'm not sure if the answer, the solution that's being presented is the solution I would propose. I've always talked about electric vehicles. I think electric vehicles, especially autonomous vehicles, can be extraordinarily efficient to deliver people from point A to point B to precisely where they are to where they want to go, and do it without having to create all sorts of infrastructure. We can use the roads that already exist. And, there's a lot more people working from home, so there's a lot less urgency for this sort of thing. But it's still, I love the fact that there are people that are thinking big in San Diego County and putting these big ideas on the table where there's a lot of debate, vigorous debate on this. And the article goes on to talk about some of the plans that the San Diego Port Commission has for the San Diego Bay. And a lot of these, I had no idea. And here's a map of it right here. I'm sharing on the video, but there's a huge project plan for Harbor Island, and they're going to be building more hotels there near the airport, but also connecting walkways from the mainland onto Harbor Island. There's talk of really blowing up Seaport Village and replacing that with this $2.5 billion central Embarcadero plan with a 500-foot observation tower, several hotels, shops, and an education hub, a large conference and concert venue, office space for ocean research. The San Diego Port District is also working on building a Costa Vista RV resort, a resort for recreational vehicles down on the Chula Vista Bayfront. And then this Gaylord Pacific Resort and Convention Center, it's a $1.1 billion project being put forward by the city of Chula Vista with hotels and $275,000 of convention center space. And that's actually going to begin later this year. They're going to start construction on this. A lot of things there down by the bay. I had no idea, but these are huge projects, big ideas. And, the other one that I've been personally seeing a lot of is what's happening down at the site for, Jack Murphy Stadium, Qualcomm Stadium. What was the last name of it? SDCCU Stadium. And, right now they're tearing down the old baseball football stadium and simultaneously building this whole San Diego State West campus there at that site. And the first part of the project is they're building a brand new football stadium for the Aztecs. And we're seeing that underway right now. And I mean, the wheels are in motion. And I know the Aztec football program is hoping that's going to be available for the start of their 2023 season. So that's exciting as well. It's like, how long ago was it that we voted on that? Or at least not we, I live in Poway, but the people that lived in the city of San Diego voted on San Diego State West. And then the other one was Soccer City. And they're going to transform that entire parking lot, stadium area. And San Diego State, that proposal was the one the voters chose. But it's going to have housing for students. It's going to provide classrooms to expand the campus, because right now San Diego State is kind of landlocked. They can't really grow much more. So this is going to provide great growth opportunities for them. And then the stadium, and I think there's going to be a lot of commercial opportunities there for businesses to be integrated on that space. So that's really exciting in my opinion. And, it's nice that we have these kind of forward-thinking people coming up with these big ideas. And honestly, Qualcomm Stadium, I mean, that place was a dump near the end. It definitely needed to go. In fact, when did they build that? It was it 67, 68, I think, something like that when it debuted. And they built it, I remember David Leland corrected me, they built it for the Chargers. But of course, the Padres used that when they started up in 1969. But that's exciting too. So more big changes. And then UCSD expansion is going on. And I read this article that said, in the next 5 to 10 years, you're not going to recognize UCSD from what it is now to what it's going to be. And I'm thinking, oh my God, UCSD isn't anything like what it was when I graduated there in 1987. Whenever I revisit campus, it's like, going to a foreign nation. It's completely different than when I was there as a student. When I was there, I graduated in 87, I think we had 13,500 undergrads. And now they're talking about as many as 40,000 students at UCSD. I mean, it's tripled in size. And they're going to be a huge expansion. They're talking about obviously more student housing, more classrooms, more research facilities. But also, it looks like they're going to be building a brand new student center. God, I remember we were at the small student center there right by the hump and the pub right in front of the main gym. And then right after I graduated in 87, they started construction on the Price Center, named after Sol Price, the founder of Price Club, which I think preceded Costco. What a visionary that guy has been. And now it looks like they're going to be building a new student center to replace the Price Center, or at least to supplement it. And then the trolley is going to be extended to the campus at UCSD. So unbelievable. And then the Pure Water project, this is the project that's converting wastewater into drinkable water. And people mockingly refer to this as toilet to tap, but they're able to produce water that's cleaner than the water that comes out of our tap today. So the technology, this is the beautiful thing about human progress, is technology is going to solve a lot of these climate challenges, a lot of these resource challenges. Technology is already solving some of our water challenge in San Diego with the desalinization plant, but wastewater, transformation into crystal clear, purified drinking water is another step in the process. If you want to learn more about that, I did a podcast, back in 2018 with Poway City Council member John Mullen when he was running for re-election in 2018. And as a city council member, he sat on, or he currently sits, I think he still does, on the board for Pure Water San Diego. And that's the plant, I think it's in Point Loma, where they're, converting wastewater into pure drinking water. And so when you add up all of these projects, it's unbelievable how much is really happening in San Diego County. And, for this last year, we've been mostly cooped up in our little COVID bubbles, staying at home. But the world around us is moving fast. And when you think of the sheer scope of all of this and the volume and all these various sections of San Diego County that are going to be dramatically transformed, it's exciting. It's we can debate the solutions and which is the right answer, but all of these are legitimate problems that need to be solved. Bringing more water, providing better transportation, transforming the San Diego Bay to be more economically vibrant and more friendly to visitors, expanding San Diego State, finding a home for Aztec football, UCSD expansion. UCSD is growing like gangbusters, lots of students. There were 118,000 students that applied to go to UCSD for the fall of 2021. That's unbelievable. And how many, if they have 40,000 students, you figure they only take 10,000 freshmen out of 118,000 applications. Incredible. So there's huge demand. There are problems that need to be solved, and we've got big thinkers that are doing it, and I think it's great. But what's interesting is we've, for at least for most of the time that I've been here in San Diego, and I came here in '82 to be a freshman at UCSD, and there has always been a small town thinking process here. And, a lot of it's because we've been sort of in the shadow of LA, right? But heck, back when I moved here in 1982, San Diego had three major sports teams, the Padres, the Chargers, and the Clippers. Now, of course, two of those three have bailed out, but which kind of confirms the naysayers or the small town thinkers. But it's interesting. It's like when Mayor Gloria, when he ran and ultimately won mayor for San Diego, city of San Diego, he was commenting about how we need to be solving big problems like infrastructure, homelessness, but we seem to get, kind of sidetracked on a lot of these small town problems like, scooters or Airbnb vacation rentals. And he wants to get us to thinking big, like a big city. And I think that's been a big part of this transformation we're going to see at the area right now that's occupied by the San Diego Sports Arena. We're going to see a major revitalization there as well. And one of the things that the voters approved, and I think is a great thing, is to remove the height limits on buildings so we can have taller buildings, high rises, more housing opportunities, really, because we have a gigantic housing crisis. But there's now really a more forward-thinking approach. It's funny, when Mayor Faulkner gave his State of the City address a year or two ago, he was talking about the need for housing, and it's the housing has often been thwarted by the NIMBYs, right? Not in my backyard, and we've got quite a bit of that here in Poway. But Now the focus is shifting. I think the public view is shifting, and now this concept that they're not calling them NIMBY, but now it's YIMBY. Yes, in my backyard, because of all the benefits that it provides to my backyard, and to our particular community. And so now the Democrats, who typically have been very resistant to development, because they're always creating that good and evil relationship between the people and the evil developers, they're now kind of turning the corner a bit as well, and really seeing the benefit to growth and to essentially progress in our city. But the article actually in the UT talked a lot about how when the San Diego Concourse was built, and that's the facility there downtown that has convention center space and has, I think the Civic Theater is there. That was built in '69. It was too small when it was built. Then the convention center was built in 1989. And of course that was not big enough. And they keep expanding it, but they're always sort of behind the curve. It's never big enough. It's been that small town thinking, and people underestimate. And then as the city keeps growing, people want to live in San Diego. People want to vacation in San Diego. People want to have their business conventions in San Diego. People don't realize the demand here in the city. But really, there's a lot of people in San Diego that just don't want growth, period. They're like, hey, put up sorry folks, the inn is full. That's what they want to essentially project to the rest of the world. Don't come to San Diego, man, we're full. I remember I had a coworker, and this was, 25 years ago. And we were talking about the San Diego airport and the future of the airport. And that's always been a hot topic, right? The airport actually has made some pretty good strides, but still it's a small airport relative to airports all across the country. And I remember my coworker saying, I don't want the airport to be bigger. I was saying, what are you talking about? It's limiting our growth and it's limiting economic opportunity. And he looked at me straight in the face. And he said, exactly. I want to limit growth. I want to limit economic opportunity, because he wanted to keep San Diego as this little village along the sea, this small town, and not become a big city. Because I think a lot of people are spooked by the sprawl of LA or the congestion of the freeways in San Francisco, and they just want to be left alone. And I think there's value in that. There's no question. That's a virtuous idea, but it's not consistent with reality. It's not consistent with human progress. What's the old saying? If you're not growing, then you're shrinking. If you're not improving, then you're declining. We have to improve. We have to evolve and evolve with the times. But still, the small town, the small town mindset, the Chargers couldn't get a stadium here. Now, frankly, I was kind of happy they didn't, because it would have had to have been subsidized by taxpayers, where, frankly, a stadium is there to help billionaires and their football team. It should be privately funded, but still we couldn't figure it out, right? As a community. And then eventually we kind of figured that the Chargers and the Spanos family wanted to be in LA anyways. Sort of a moot point, but still the idea of getting a new stadium for the Chargers was a huge hurdle because of the small thinking of a lot of people in San Diego. And so it's nice to see that we're turning the corner here. It's nice to see that people are beginning to embrace developers and understand that they do offer quality. They offer value, not just for their own pocketbooks, but for the community at large. Poway is going through a transformation itself right now. On Poway Road, there's a lot of development. And even here over by Stone Ridge Country Club, they're going to be building the farm. So even here in Poway, we're turning the corner and embracing growth, embracing the future, embracing new possibilities. And I think this is terrific. Now, if you go back in history, it's interesting a long time ago, San Diego used to think big. And around the turn of the century, 120 years ago, San Diego was made a major naval port, which makes sense given the given the geography of the San Diego Bay, but we had a large naval presence here early. And then there was the 1915 Panama, California Expo. And, I was just reading about this just a few months ago as I was just surfing through YouTube and watching videos about San Diego and our history. And this is an interesting topic. It's worthy of exploration. I encourage you to check it out. But the thumbnail is right after the Panama Canal was built. Suddenly, there was opportunity for people on the East Coast to take passenger ships and visit the West Coast. And San Diego, of course, is the first, major city in California that they would encounter, traveling northbound from the Panama Canal. And so they had this big expo, and that's a big part of how Balboa Park got built. That's really how the San Diego Zoo got started. And was a big part of establishing San Diego as a legit city, not just a village or a presidio or a mission, on Father Junipero Serra's El Camino Real, but it was a legitimate city. And that expo was a big part of it. That was our early leaders thought big. And then they built Mission Bay Aquatic Park, which is one of the most amazing and unusual, really, aquatic parks in America, where they transformed a swamp into this amazing vacation destination and all kinds of water sports and leisure activities and housing opportunities that were built along that area. And then, of course, talking about UCSD again, 1960, UC San Diego was built. And that was another inflection point on the curve. That was a time when San Diego was growing up even more, having a major institutional research facility here in San Diego, essentially a hub for scientists to come and to innovate. And that's been a big part of why we have this great biotech community here in San Diego. There's a lot of other forms of high technology that are here. And some people have referred to San Diego as sort of like a small version of Silicon Valley. And all that really couldn't have been made possible if we didn't have a major university here. So UCSD was a big part of this as well. And it seemed like, San Diego was growing and progressing, and, from the naval facility to the Panama, California Expo to the growth after World War I and World War II. Then you get UCSD in the 1960s, and then suddenly we get into the 70s and 80s, and people are like, whoa, wait a minute, hold on, and they wanted to slow things down. And that's why we saw all of these, essentially, I'll say, the NIMBYs really got more in control, and they wanted to protect San Diego and protect it essentially from evolution. They wanted to freeze it in time. And this is the debate that we even have here in our small town of Poway. There are people that want to essentially freeze Poway in time and keep it the way it's always been, or transform it backwards in time to the way that it used to be in the 1960s and 1970s. And I'm not saying that flippantly. There are a lot of people that really want that, but it's a dream, and it's really not reality, because things constantly change, right? That if there's any one constant, it's change is the constant. And, people can resist change. And I get it. I resist change in certain aspects of my life. But when we embrace it, that's when we move forward. When we embrace it, that's when we see opportunity. When we embrace change, that's when we progress, not just as individuals, not just as a community, but that's how human civilization progresses. So this was just a fascinating article. And like I said, I was planning on doing this podcast and really talking more about goal setting. And this really tees it up very nicely, I thought. And, Sandy, the article, what is the title of the article here? San Diego is thinking big, scary big. So the question to you is, are you thinking big? Are you thinking scary big? I mean, what are you doing in your business, in your life, to think big? And I know it's hard, to think big. I mean, I know we had the Great Recession, 12 years ago, and that punched a lot of people in the nose and set people back. The whole concept of thinking big was really off the radar. People were just trying to survive. Then you go through most of the 2000 teens, and we had, steady economic growth. And then this COVID thing happens, and all of a sudden our worlds get blown up. People are working from home. A lot of people are out of work. The whole society seems to be kind of frozen to a degree. And again, the idea of thinking big sometimes gets away from us. We start just thinking very day to day. We just want to kind of get through it rather than focusing on these big ideas. There's a concept, and if you're in the business community, you may have heard it. It's called BHAG. And you're like, what the hell is BHAG? And it's BHAG. It's an acronym, BHAG. And it stands for Big, Hairy, Audacious Goal. And this is a concept that came up in the book called Built to Last, Successful Habits of Visionary Companies. And it was written by James Collins and Jerry Porras. And James Collins is a great author. And if you ever read his book, Good to Great, I mean, that's an awesome book. And there's a lot of concepts actually in his book, Good to Great, that I talk about all the time, or I think about all the time when I'm working in business and when I'm consulting with my clients. I mean, the whole idea of getting the right people on the bus and getting the wrong people off the bus, talks about, how you assemble your teams, the hedgehog concept, what can you be the greatest in the world at? The flywheel concept of building momentum, the Stockdale complex about confronting the brutal facts. That's all good stuff. I mean, Jim Collins has really written some great things that are helpful in the business world, but also personally. So, as I was preparing this podcast, I was thinking to myself, geez, those would be wonderful podcast episodes. And so I'm going to do those very soon, talking about sort of a book review of those, because the bullet points in those books are powerful. But in Built to Last, he talked about the BHAG, the big, hairy, audacious goal. And this is, kind of that goal, that North Star, that visionary idea that just gets people in their gut, that really motivates people and they can see the vision. And a great example is when John F. Kennedy, was it at his inauguration or shortly thereafter, he said, I intend to put a man on the moon and return him safely to Earth this decade, in the 1960s. That was a big, hairy, audacious goal, something that sounded absolutely outrageous at the time, a time when, frankly, that was before John Glenn, was up in space and had orbited. So this was beyond the scope of thinking of most ordinary people. Probably scientists were the only ones that realized that they could actually pull this off, and only if they were fortunate and only if they had lots of resources and funding to do it. But it was a big, hairy, audacious goal, and it galvanized the people, and it rallied the people, and it was a tangible concept. It was something that, had a focal point. There was a finish line. You knew when you completed it, and it rallied people. And those are the kinds of big ideas, scary big ideas, like we were talking about in the Union Tribune article, that really can motivate you on an individual level or motivate a company. And there are lots of other, BHAGs, and I looked up a few more, and this is a good one. And this was, this is for Amazon. And now Amazon has obviously changed dramatically, especially over the last 10 years. But remember when Amazon first started up, it was Jeff Bezos, and he was in his garage, and he was trying to build an online store, and he wanted to make it a bookstore. And his big, hairy, audacious goal then was to provide every book ever printed in any language and sell it in less than 60 seconds. And he did. and really that's what got Amazon going. And as a result, Barnes and Noble and Borders and a lot of other bookstores couldn't compete. He transformed the industry, and he built a model that was scalable. And now suddenly he could venture into other markets. And now Amazon has grown to be this unbelievably amazing company that is now. But it never would have been. Amazon never would have been what it is now if he didn't have that original BHAG of providing every book ever printed in any language in less than 60 seconds. Another great one is from Microsoft. put a computer on every desk in every home. Now, Microsoft started in the late 1970s. I mean, back then, the IBM PC and MS-DOS, much less Windows, didn't even exist. The Apple computers, when did those come on? I think those were coming on a market right around then in the late 70s, maybe early 80s. I know that there was, of course, the Radio Shack TRS-80 was back there in the late 70s. I remember my computer math class. Whoop, phone ringing during a podcast. We're going to turn that off. But I remember in my computer math class at Mills High School in Millbrae, California, where I went to high school. I took a basic programming class there. It was fantastic, a great introduction to computers. But some of my classmates were just hardcore computer nerds, and they had the TRS-80 from Radio Shack. They used to jokingly call it the Trash 80. But back then, the idea that there would be home computers, it sounded outrageous. But it's come true. And then I even remember in the 1990s, and back in the early 90s, I worked for a Japanese software company. And what we did is we localized software for the Japanese market. We essentially translated user interfaces, translated user manuals into Japanese, and repackaged the product and sold it in Japan. And we also imported Japanese software into the United States and sold it to Japanese expatriates that were living in America. It was a very interesting company and learned a great deal. But back then in the early 90s, Windows was already a thing. Of course, the Macintosh, I think that started right in 1984 with that George Orwell commercial during the Super Bowl. But then in the late 80s, we had Microsoft Windows. And back then it was like Windows version 1 or 2. Eventually it was 3.1. And that was before we got to Windows 95. But we were seeing a lot more proliferation of desktop computers in the workplace. But we were also seeing it in the home. And I remember some of my Japanese coworkers that came over from Tokyo to our San Diego office, and we talk about computers, and we talked about a computer in the house. And back then I had one because prior to that I used to work for Wang Laboratories, which was really like more or less the inventor of word processing systems, and was the darling of Wall Street in the 1980s, and had grown into a reasonably successful mid-range computer company. But then with the advent of the PC, they kind of got bulldozed over. I mean, just as an aside, Wang Laboratories in some cases were behind the curve in terms of big, hairy, audacious goals and being a visionary. But in other categories, they were way ahead of the curve. I remember in my last year I worked there, Wang had developed a tablet computer with a stylus, and it would interface with mid-range systems and with desktop computers. It was like an iPad. And it was fantastic. And it had the graphical user interface just like you would have with Windows or with the Macintosh. And this was in 1990. 1990 they had this. And that was before, they were way ahead of the curve. But anyways, I digress. The point is that when I worked for the Japanese software company, a lot of my Japanese coworkers, we talk about how we have computers in the home in the United States. And I said back then that we're going to see computers in every home. And they just couldn't conceive of that idea. They thought, no way. I mean, they're just too expensive, and and what would people use them for? Because these guys were engineers and they were programmers. And I was saying a lot of things. I mean, they'll be able to do their banking, and, I think Quicken was starting to become a thing back then. Or maybe that was a little early for it, but people were using Lotus 1-2-3 and VisiCalc back then to do financial analysis. I said, it's going to grow. You watch. And they didn't believe me, but it's true. And now Microsoft, a computer on every desk in every home. That's a big, hairy, audacious goal, and it's come true. And without those big, hairy, audacious goals, you don't have that brass ring to reach for, that idea that not only galvanizes a nation, like putting a man on the moon, galvanizes a company, like providing every book in every language, and have it for sale in less than 60 seconds. Or, big, hairy, audacious goals. I mean, there's a role for that in life. And I don't know what you've done in your life as far as goal setting is concerned. I've done it. I've gone through various phases of my life setting goals. And it's a fun exercise, right? I mean, you talk about things that you want to do in your personal life with family and children. There are goals that you have for your career. And if you own a business, goals for that business itself. There's goals for health and personal fitness. There's goals for leisure and, travel and places you want to visit. I mean, all of us likely have a bucket list of some sort, or if we don't have it documented, we probably have one in our head. And I've gone through various phases of this, and you make this list of all the things you want to do. And at some point it becomes like overwhelming, right? At some point it's hard to really get a hold of any one of those. Some of them seem insane, like there was no way you would ever achieve them. But again, you'd be surprised at what's possible. And when I've gone through this process, I can look back at some of my own goals that I've set, and I know some of them I've hit a home run on. And I've hit that goal and gone beyond my expectation and been extraordinarily pleased. There are other goals that I've gone close to all the way, but never really finished. I don't know if you have any goals like that. There are other goals that, I just never really kind of got traction. I got part way. And then there are others that I've had on my list for a long time that just seem like sort of a dream. Bucket list things like travel to some of these, places around the world that I thought that'd be wonderful, but someday, I'll get to that someday. And someday sometimes never comes, right? We get busy. And, I remember when I was young, I start my career and then you get married and then, oh my God, you have children. And that rocks your world in a good way. But that was by far the most transformational event in my life was when my daughter was born. And it changed my life radically, but for the right reasons, all good, but it was huge. And then your goals change, right? And it shifts a little bit. And it's interesting is that I know that, time just keeps rolling, right? The calendar keeps flipping, and suddenly, you drift to a degree. There are certain goals you're always trying to achieve, but then there's also the day-to-day, right? You've got to take care of things around your house. You got to take care of things in your job. You've got to take care of things in your own personal life. And we can go through and be so buried in the weeds that we lose sight of the big picture. It's the forest versus the trees. Sometimes those goals that we originally set out for us when we were all optimistic and in our 20s or even in our 30s become unrealistic, become almost sort of fade away into the ether. They suddenly fall off the radar of your bucket list. And it's a damn shame, because when you made those goals in the very beginning, they were critical. I mean, they were huge motivators for you at that time of your life. Now, there are some people that are just really good at this, that set goals, achieve goals, hit home runs, in and out, day after day, year after year. They get their stuff done. And man, tip of the hat to those people. But that's hard, with everything that goes on in life. So just recently, like over the weekend, I was really reflecting on some of my own goals. And I started rethinking my bucket list, and I had the document. It was on my computer, and I went and found it, and I went through that list. And I said to myself, like, oh my God, this is amazing to re-look at the list, because again, a lot of them I've done. I've hit home runs. A lot of them were incomplete. That's the grade I would give myself. I've got part way and maybe I gave up, or I got part way and I'm still part way. But then there are others I haven't even started. And some that I completed. I mean, I remember I went to, like, one of them was to go to Europe, and I didn't go to Europe until I was, I think I was 54, maybe 53. And my daughter was there studying abroad in Florence for the summer between her sophomore and junior year of college. And I went out and visited her and spent 2.5 weeks in Europe. And we went in Rome and Bologna. We went up to Slovenia, the home country of Melania Trump, and went to Lake Bled. And then we went into Czechoslovakia, we went into Croatia. And then we went eventually to Germany. We went to Munich, and then we went to Vienna, Austria. And Vienna, Austria, by the way, was my favorite city on that trip. Went to, why is the name of the city escaping me? The capital of Hungary, Budapest. Went to Budapest, and then we went to Prague. And it was all a whirlwind of 2.5 weeks, but we saw so much. But I was finally able to go to Europe, and I know a lot of my friends. I mean, they went to Europe when they were in college. They took the summer off and went to Europe, and that wasn't really realistic for me and my situation, financially and with my family. And then, you kind of get going in life, and some of those goals, they sort of slip away. But I finally got back and was able to accomplish that. But there's still so many other places I want to visit. I mean, I have a long list of places I want to go. But, I started thinking when I was going through this bucket list, I was like, oh my God, I'm 55 years old. I'm about to turn 56 here real soon. And, I remember my friend Todd Fox, Todd, if you're watching this, I know you check out some of our podcast episodes, but Todd and I went to college together at UCSD. And I remember, he has since, really been, he's gone through a lot of changes in his life, all positive. And he's really adopted a very positive mindset. I know he's really big into the Tony Robbins community, and he's become this worldwide traveler. I mean, it's unbelievable the amount of places that he posts on Facebook where he's been around the world. It's incredible. And on one of his posts, he said, how much time do you have left? Think about it. How many healthy summers do you have left where you can go on trips where you've got to be fairly active and you got to get around? And, who knows what the future is? We don't know how long we're going to live. And then even if I'm in my 50s and the 60s are just right around the corner, it'll probably be here in a moment or two, snap of the fingers, it'll be here. And as you get older, you run into health complications. I mean, anything can happen. How much time do you have left? And oh my God, I've got this whole bucket list of things I want to do. And when I started making that list, I started thinking, holy crap, I could be running out of time. And it sounds morbid. I hope to God I live to my 80s and my 90s, but let's be real. When I'm in my 80s, I'm not going to be a globetrotter traveling through the jungles of Southeast Asia. I mean, I'm not going to be as much of a thrill seeker or an adventurer as I get older. So really, how much time do I have left? And so what I did is I decided I'm going to go through my bucket list, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to just slot them on the calendar. Say, okay, I can do this one this year and that one next year. But I said, well, that's too broad. I'm going to put them into quarters, Q1, January through March, Q2, April, June, Q3, July, September, Q4, October, December. So I created like a little chart in Microsoft Word, and I set up all the quarters, and then I started assigning bucket lists and slotted them where I wanted to without spacing them out so it was realistic, not putting too much in any one quarter. And I looked at it, and I said, wow, this is achievable. But a lot of this, had me out till my year 62 to get all this done in a realistic fashion. I mean, I'm not going to take multiple giant trips a year. Maybe I can do one a year, maybe one every other year. And I plotted it out, and it was incredible. Rather necessarily, it's one thing to set goals and timelines, set deadlines for your goals. But this is interesting, is to sort of see the matrix of where all your goals are time slotted in your future life and when you think you can achieve them. And so what I did is so there's only like one or two per quarter. And, some are health related goals or fitness. Some are travel goals. Some are business goals. Some are, other kinds of personal goals that I have set out for myself. And some of them are milestones on the pathway to the big prize, right? If you want to have a huge goal, you got to be able to make steps along the way. And I slotted those steps in some of the quarters as well. And the end result of this was massive. Mentally, I had clarity. Mentally, I was no longer thinking about future things I wanted to do, things I'm doing now, challenges I have. Sometimes your mind can get clouded. I was able to zero in and just have 2 goals for this quarter for me. Besides my regular day-to-day things, taking care of my family, taking care of my customers, building my business, besides that, which is important, is crucial. It's like the biggest part of life is handling your family and your career and yourself, your personal self. But I wanted to put 2 in, and were these big, hairy, audacious goals? No, they are steps along the way, or they are part of a grander, big, hairy, audacious goal. And, one of my big, hairy, audacious goals is to travel the world, is really to visit every continent. Well, maybe not Antarctica, but to visit every continent. And to visit as many countries as possible. I know one of my other friends from college, Mike Lopez, I remember he shared a post about this a long time ago, but he must have visited at least 80 countries. 80. Holy moly. It may even be over 100. And how many nations are on this planet? It's like, 150, 160? It's something like that. I don't know if I'll be able to achieve that. I don't know if that's realistic or really what I want to do, because there's a lot of places that frankly are not of much interest. But definitely I like to visit every continent. And so far I've been to 3. I've been to North America, of course, Europe, which I just described, which I've only been once and I want to go many times. And I've been to Asia. I've been to Tokyo. But there's still so much more in Asia, obviously, to go visit. But I started time slotting these goals. And I'll tell you, like I said, I felt invigorated. I felt that these things that I sort of had on this bucket list that I kind of drifted away from to a degree, a lot of these things are achievable. They're realistic. And if you slot them by quarter, you only have to focus on those 1 or 2 things. And for you, it might not be a trip. For you, it might be something else. Or it might be, you just want to hike to the top of Mount Woodson to Potato Chip Rock. That could be it. And maybe you need to work yourself into shape to do it. Or it could be anything, whether it's local here in the San Diego area, whether it's somewhere in the United States you want to visit, whether it's things you want to accomplish. Maybe you want to do a triathlon. My daughter did a triathlon. When was that? That was in 2019. Incredible. I mean, that's a huge bucket list. Maybe you want to plan for that. There are all kinds of things that you could do. And if you time slot them, then you know what you can get done this quarter. And then the ones that are further out, you can plan properly on what you need to do to get there, because you're not going to suddenly decide you're going to do a triathlon and get it done that quarter. You're going to have to build up to it. But if you time slot it, it's unbelievable. So I had just great clarity. There was less noise in my mind. I felt optimistic, a lot more optimistic than I was. And I've been sort of on this high all week thinking about this. And I'm really happy I have a chance to share it with you. So I'm going to do more of this. I'll probably get into more detail about it, and we'll maybe talk more about goal setting and ways that we can achieve some of the dreams that we have, things that we really want to accomplish in our lives. And I'll take you on the journey with me on some of the things that I've done or that I plan on doing. But there's another podcast I listen to that gives me a great deal of inspiration, and it's called Wealth, Power, and Influence. And the host of that is Jason Stapleton, and he's a really good guy. And one of the things he talks about in his business are quarterly sprints. And these quarterly sprints they do planning. And rather than having an annual plan and the things they want to get done, he and his team, and really his team is him and 2 people, the 3 of them, they get together and they say, okay, we know what our ultimate objective is. What do we need to get done this quarter? And they brainstorm They strategize, they make a to-do list, and they just go balls to the wall to get that done that quarter. So sometimes monthly planning, a month's just not enough to get certain projects done. A year, it's too long. There's too much slack. But a quarter, that's a really tight time frame to get stuff done. Whether it's leaping over certain hurdles in your business, whether it's accomplishing certain things in your life on your bucket list, and you only have to add a couple of them. And that I've often had too many goals, too many where it became too much, where you lacked any focus on any single thing. But when you zero in on a quarter, you can accomplish a great deal. And then all those other things that were originally swimming in your mind, you can slot them out for future quarters. And you can say to yourself, okay, I got a plan. I don't have to think about those anymore. I'm going to get to them. I'm confident I will. I just got to get these 2 things done this quarter, or this one major thing done this quarter. And then I can move to the next quarter. And then suddenly you begin building momentum. And it's part of that flywheel concept that's in Good to Great. But you begin building momentum and you begin checking boxes. And then suddenly, hey man, you've got some velocity here. You're getting major traction. And so, I'm thinking a lot more about this sort of thing. And I just got some really good vibes. And maybe you can pick it up in this podcast on how I'm feeling. So, so anyways, we'll be back at you real soon. I'm going to have another podcast here shortly. I'm really trying hard to stay on Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 2, but sometimes that's not as realistic as I'd like it to be. And this past Wednesday, I had a business commitment, and this Friday coming, I have a personal commitment that I'm going to be unable to do my live stream. So I'm recording this one today to make up for Wednesday. I'll probably be recording another one tomorrow or maybe over the weekend to make up for Friday. And then we'll try to work our way back on to the Monday, Wednesday, Friday live stream on YouTube and on Facebook. So if you like what we're doing here, there's a few things you can do to help us. And we always love your support. We're very thankful for your support. Share this podcast with a friend. That makes a huge difference. We only grow this audience through word of mouth. So share it with a friend. Verbally, share it in a post, retweet it. I put all of our episodes on our Facebook page, John Riley Project. And I post a lot of the content on my Twitter handle, John Riley Poway. So, share, retweet, in some cases, just talk about it with a friend about the John Riley Project and encourage them to check it out. That would be really helpful. And I'd be most thankful if you could do that. The other thing you can do is subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to our channel, and then you'll get updates when we have new episodes. And if we're doing a live stream, if you click on subscribe and I think the bell next to it, you'll get a real-time alert when a new episode's been posted or when we are live streaming, so you can join us. And on the live stream, we love your participation, where you can chime in and we can engage and have some great dialogue. And the last thing you can do that would be really helpful, it would be to leave a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts on iTunes. So every podcast there, you can give a 1 to 5 stars. If you can leave a 5-star rating, if you think we deserve it, a 5-star rating would be wonderful. And you can write 1 or 2 sentences. We've had a number of people that have done that, and that's really helpful. And that builds credibility for our podcast. And we're most thankful for that. If you could help us in that way, that would be terrific. So I'm trying to help you provide value. I'm hoping you can help me, help build the audience, and it's a win-win relationship, right? Which is what it's all about. So, okay, I was hoping this was going to be a short podcast. It's been a little longer than I thought, but that's what usually happens when I start going. But thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And you know what? This is episode 200. So talking about big, hairy, audacious goals, talking about San Diego's thinking big, scary big, and transforming your bucket list into a actionable quarterly plan. It's doable, my friends. We need to think big. We got to quit thinking small. And when we think big, then big things happen in our life. And that's when we are pursuing our happiness, right? So thanks again for joining us. This is John Riley Project, episode 200, and we'll see you later, friends. Bye-bye.